Thank you to our $5 patrons, Strawbones, Redwolf4765, Midnight Gemlord, and Artigoon555.
The Demon King was desperate above all other things. Death was coming for him trillions upon trillions of years before it should. As his son was tearing himself away from the king felt the power of all the beings that stood before him. The Fairy King was low on magic. Competing with his comrades against the might of the dark deity was far beyond his limits. That strange human had lost their immortality, so all the damage done to them actually chipped away at their seemingly boundless vitality. The other human was dying, no doubt, even if their power eclipsed the king in his prime. The giant girl was of no concern, all of her magic having been used to create the grave for the god. The Witch of Belialawan may be an issue with her infinite magic pool, but her power could be negated if all went according to this rush plan he was daring to develop. The same with that puppet of the madman Gotha, whose stamina may be endless, but their power was both ignorable and possibly underwhelming with the right preparation. That left the Daughter of Light, whose power could also be made a non-issue. However, the real issue would be his own flesh and blood. Think his own offspring would be such a threat rather than an asset. And he could feel it. His power was being restored through a mixture of his own native healing and the goddess wench. He needed something to defeat him. He needed to create something that could destroy his own creation. Creations. He had one option. And as the last commandment of piety began to slip out from his second son's flesh, the king chose that option. As piety dove back into Zeldris, the other commandments sprawled out and slammed into the earth, and the Demon King allowed them to mutate and grow into their most previous hosts, as he worked all the mental and healing magic he knew into Zeldris, forcefully overwriting his and all the commandments' memory to a time not that long ago. Of course, first the revived gallant burst into laughter, spinning his halberd with glee. Finally, after all these years of imprisonment, I can take revenge on you, Meliodas. The Dark Prince blinked, confused. I gotta be frank with you. This is perfect, Derriere declared. The revenge we've been waiting for 3,000 years is finally upon us, and now I finally get to strike that traitor down. Is that what you mean? Monspeed asked, and Derriere gave a nod and a grunt of affirmation. I agree. I'm also happy to strike down this rebellious traitor in the name of our Lord, Fraudrin declared. I'm sorry to have to do this to you, old friend, Gluxinia said, with sad eyes yet a sadistic smile, Basquios writhing and pulsing around the demonic Fairy King. We do what must be done, Droll declared, taking up a fighting stance. Doesn't mean we can't have fun doing it, though, Melascula hissed, her own darkness curling around her form. With that being said, I believe it is time to bring death to the lost prince, Greyroad hummed. Esterosa stood there quietly, watching his other brother as he gripped his head. Mel, brother. Zelda struggled and fought, nearly tearing his own hair out. Suddenly, he snapped into place. Traitor! That is one sick, twisted old man you got there, Captain. Oh? No, Meliodas said, inhaling deeply and exhaling before bursting into laughter upon realizing his father's desperation. I see what you did there, you terrible old coot. Meliodas' laughter became all the more wild, even slightly crazed, but there was a narrowing of his eyes. Guys, let me handle this. He reactivated the commandments in body, power, and curse. The Sins were shocked, but confused. Why did their captain seem so casual about this? Captain, you shouldn't underestimate them. They've slain you once before, King cried as Meliodas began to walk forward, flipping Lost Vein casually in his hand. King, watch this. The commandments, tired of their former leader's impertinence, rushed the casual kin of the king, and the battle began.
Thank you to our final patron, Sinners Lancelot, Praise the Sun, Strawbones, and Aaron.
Cataclysm calls again. The revival of the Ten Commandments rocks the world of Britannia as a last-ditch effort of the king of all demons. And before them stands only one man, one demon with the power and knowledge to hold against them all. Who shall prosper? Who shall prevail? The eldest son of the king of darkness, the scion of shadow, the restricted destroyer, 4,000 years in the making. Post-purgatory base Meliodas, or the creatures of the night, the warriors who lay claim to the dark creation, and the monstrous guardians and conquerors of the demon world, the Ten Commandments. Let's find out now. Now, for power, let me do a simple process for the Ten Commandments. I'm going to be highballing all of them to their extremes. You'll find out why soon enough. Let's start with the weakest commandment. Fraudron's best feat is being able to be somewhat relative to a base clone of post-resurrection Meliodas. Now, to be generous, I'll say that only Meliodas' magic weakens when he uses Lost Vein for clones, as all his physicals are the same when they're able to react in tandem to certain things. So, let's just say Fraudron, at his full power, is directly equal to base post-resurrection Meliodas. With that being the case, he's quite strong overall and a worthy threat. But remember, post-resurrection base Meliodas is his limit. Next up, let's hop on Galen. At his limit in Critical Over, he was scared into running away by what Escanor implied to be a late morning version of himself. And just for Galen's sake, we'll say that he is directly relative to late morning Escanor. Then on top of that, we'll argue he's also in that relative tier due to his prime self Archangel scaling by bisecting Tarmiel on base and Critical Over manhandling Tarmiel's attack. This leaves Galen peaking at around late morning Escanor level and lesser Archangel tier. Quite powerful overall, and that's pretty good. This would actually put him around post-resurrection Escanor fight assault mode Meliodas, which is great, and let's leave him there. His peak is post-resurrection assault mode Escanor fight Meliodas. Remember that. Now, let's talk about Melascula. We have a definitive limit for her, expressed by herself, which is Demon King powered Zeldris and freshly awoken post-resurrection assault mode Meliodas. Her hack seems to hit her limit around there, as she admits she cannot contain Zeldris the moment he activates the Demon King's power, and we see a transforming assault mode post-resurrection Meliodas rip free of her cage pretty easily, like accidentally while in the middle of transforming. Notably, this is still a crazy great place for her, as she claims, and has no reason to be lying, that she can contain any member of the Ten Commandments up to DK Pizel, which would include the likes of Monspeed, Derriere, Droll, Luxini, and even Estarossa, who are all monsters in their own rights who have great scaling. All up to low-end Transform Chandler and lesser Archangel tier, which is great. And you know what? Let's wank. We'll assume Melascula, who was there at the advent of the Endura, and overall seems quite knowledgeable about the levels of strength of the rest of the group. I'll even say she's strong enough to contain Endura, Monspeed, and Derriere. That's her peak. High Archangel tier, scaling to the likes of Prime Mel and Prime Elizabeth, just below them. Remember, that's her peak, being extremely generous. Next, let's talk about the bulky, beefy, juicy powerhouse of the Ten Commandments, Derriere. Yeah, not Droll, Derriere. Now, to be fair for her, we're going to give her the ultimate respect. We're going to really help her out here. We're going to use Prime Derriere, her peak prime self, with 7 hearts. This means Endura. However, base Derriere is not really a joke, swinging around pretty well in those mid to lesser Archangel tiers, being able to clearly pummel Tarmiel with a few hits and even piercing through Sariel's amazingly powerful wind barrier with one whole punch. And on top of that, she's even able to swing up and punch up through Commandment Mael. Even though he was being restrained, the fact that she's able to damage him at all is still very impressive. And now, with that on top of it, we know she shines her brightest when at her darkest point, where she goes Endura. Now, the Endura are a cause for a lot of debate, especially Endura, Monspeed, and Derriere in particular, mainly because of what is said about them. However, before we hop into that, let's just talk about her feats. Once freshly awoken, she ends up bodybagging Ludishel, who was destroying her, and proceeds to face-tank Ludishel's attacks with no damage, despite their super effective nature to her. She, then in tandem with Monspeed, happens to nearly and barely almost overwhelm Prime Goddess Elizabeth, which puts her individually above higher Archangel tier, yet below the top tiers of the time, like Full Power Prime Elizabeth, Full Power Prime Meliodas. There seems to be this misconception that Meliodas saying that all that's left for the Endura is to go crazy, destroy everything, and die.
with their final heart was seemingly him admitting inferiority, but that's pretty clearly not the case, with Meliodas in his prime being equal to Elizabeth in terms of raw power, if not slightly superior, and Elizabeth being able to hold back both Endura at the same time, meaning in a one-on-one, they could be defeated likely by either party. However, their amp survival Endura state, you could imply they together surpass Prime Elizabeth, as Tarmiel and Sariel need to step in to help her really get the job done. However, with that being the case, she's still holding back two of them at the same time, splitting her magic, splitting the potency of her attack, which very likely means that even in their desperate, oh no, we're about to be reverted state of Endura, they likely still, at their peaks, scale beneath Prime Elizabeth. At least on their own, considering it took both of them overwhelming Elizabeth at once in order for them to even do the feat, which means individually they likely couldn't do it on their own. That means Endura Derriere peaks out at somewhere beneath Prime Elizabeth and Prime No Commandment Meliodas, or arguably Prime Commandment Meliodas. Doesn't necessarily matter. But you know what? Let's just be charitable. Even though there's nothing in the series to suggest this, let's say individually Endura Derriere scales directly to Prime Elizabeth. They are equals in raw power. Because you know what? Let's be nice, even though in reality, they don't actually scale. But we'll be nice. The same case goes for Mont Speet, who we'll get into next. So the trickster Mont Speet is a bit of a demon, and to be fair, they all are, who in base has slightly worse scaling than Derriere. While she's able to deal with lesser to mid archangels in terms of just raw power, even able to damage 3 Commandment Mael, he's stuck at a definitely lower level than that, with his best feats blowing through Tarmiel's head and manhandling Estarossa. These aren't bad feats, but he peaks at lesser archangel tier and base through his scaling. Endura Mont Speet should just scale relative to Endura Derriere though. Manhandling lesser archangels requiring Prime Elizabeth to step in will make him equal to Prime Commandment Meliodas and Prime Elizabeth too. Because, why not? Why not? Once again, don't if you're just not being generous. But if you want to be generous, just say that. Just say that. Let's just go with that one. Then we have the Giant King, Jolokun, who at first glance isn't the most impressive, but with further analysis and a whole lot of wank, you can get him quite high. He was strong enough pre-commandment that you could knock away a bloodlusted Ludishel, dancing to the point that pre-commandment Demon King Powers Elders figured he'd be too much of a threat to fight head-to-head and just sealed off his magic. And ironically enough, this is actually kind of consistent for Droll, especially considering that with the Commandment amp, he would be high Commandment mid-Archangel tier, as he alongside Galaxinia was able to restrain and rough up True Form Chandler, who is considered alongside Kuzak to make up for the missing 9, count them, 9 Commandments, which makes Droll by proxy pretty much at least a mid-Archangel tier, which is pretty darn solid. To wank him though, since it's generosity season, I'll say Droll is equal to Prime Ludishel and True Form Chandler. Because, you know, why not? For Galaxinia, he is in a very similar tier to Droll. While he doesn't have a slapping and Archangel feat, he's implied to have brawled with Demon King Powers Eldris pre-commandment based on his rampage that we see him going on in the original timeline. And even if you don't want that, he has the same shared feat against True Form Chandler. So, he a demon. For the sake of Wank and his narrative relativity to Droll, if not superiority, but we'll talk about that another day, Galaxinia in terms of raw power is equal to Prime Ludishel and True Form Chandler. Because why not? We are wanking everybody. And Grey Road is up next, and unfortunately, I'd say out of all the commandments, she's kind of a filler character, and really, she doesn't scale to anybody. Like, at least in terms of AP or DC, like, nothing. And you may think I'm kidding, but try to remember all the fights Grey Road has. Don't worry, you don't have to think too hard, because the first fight, she just sealed Meliodas off in one location with hacks, and then her next fight, she got no-souled by a freshly awoken post-Infinity Merlin. That's it. She doesn't damage anybody. And of course, that's not her main thing, but at the same time, it sort of leaves her pretty hard to scale in terms of at least like raw power. And with there being no relativity anywhere, I could use numbers, but due to my endless hatred of numbers and my bottomless fear of them, I won't. I'll just say Grey Road scales to Demon Mark post-Druid Meliodas because Grey Road was able to tag him. That's it. Even though the wake in my heart, I really can't put her any higher. Then we're down to the bigger brother, the girthier brother, Estarossa. Now, I'm not going to say one commandment Estarossa is fodder, but unfortunately, he's not that impressive. He beats the human archangels while they're graceless, and then kind of tags Tarmiel, but that was just Tarmiel flexing and being mean. He also puts base Mont Speet in a headlock. That's about it for his base self. He doesn't really do much else, like loses to Escanor, doesn't scale remotely at all to him. Then also loses to the grace-using archangels pretty instantaneously, to the point where he has to absorb another commandment to even put up a fight and become relative to them. Yeah, he ain't that much. Overall, he's around lesser archangel tier before he starts absorbing commandments, and arguably, you could really say he's lower. But to be generous, we'll just say he's lesser archangel tier, because, sure. Then, we go on to Papa Zeldris. Zeldris in his commandment form is the strongest we see him sentient in the entire series. Arguably even cursed by light. We'll talk about that another time. Just because of the crazy amps he has access to. However, unironically, his best feats come from after his commandment amp is removed. He manages to ragdoll Marguerite Ludishel, Late Morning Escanor, and Merlin all at the same time with Omnis Nebula, and then later goes on to fight with Full Wings King from a distance. And then on top of that, he proceeds to fight and ultimately lose to Afternoon Mael once he got off-guarded. Though one could argue he did win, he just got snuck while he was heavily fatigued and battle damaged. That put together places him around the strongest Archangel tier in terms of strength, commandment included, and while I don't personally believe this for reasons we'll get into, puts this Zeldris just under Prime Meliodas levels of strength via Mael scaling. Now, we have done all that thick, girthy, juicy wank. Scale. It was just normal, regular scale. This is all where they regularly scale to, trust me. But plot twist, shock horror, we have one more commandment to scale. Well, kinda. Let's talk about Prime Meliodas. Now, with the advent of true magic Meliodas, Prime Meliodas is a title I constantly get questions about. Like, what do I mean by Prime? Well, Prime Meliodas, in my eyes, is Meliodas of 3,000 years past when he was the leader of the 10 Commandments. Mainly because that was literally the peak of his power before true magic. And to be fair, there is a lot, and I mean a lot of hype around this guy. He was known to be unmatched, the most wicked and powerful demon, and in the words of his own father, the creator of all the demons who would know best, he was the top dog. And he forced a Prime Mael to retreat in his own realm with simply his demon mark. He was considered the only equal to the Bloody Ellie, who was arguably the most powerful goddess at the time, having a power stated by Nakaba to either rival or surpass the 4 archangels, and obviously she has her feat of holding off both Endura at the same time, who individually were ragdolling someone like Ludishel. On top of that, we have the idea that his defection to the side of the goddesses literally allowed for the entire holy war to begin. He alone was so powerful that he sort of kept the balance simply by existing on the demon side. And the crazy thing is, no one actually scales to this Meliodas, or at least no commandment. I just took you through a whole goon scale of all of them, slurping every commandment off to such insane degrees that I don't think anyone would actually agree, unless in very specific context, if you're being a demon, if you will. And even with that, guess what? No, really, a single one of them actually reaches this girly, full power Prime Meliodas. Some came close. I was even generous enough to say the Endura directly scaled to him, but even then, as you could probably tell from my statements earlier, I don't really agree with that, because obviously it took 2 of them at the same time to overwhelm Meliodas' equal, while she was specifically not trying to harm them, trying to save them. I don't think that makes you scale. But regardless, even if I give that equivalency, it doesn't matter. But you'll find out. Prime Meliodas really is just that guy. He is so much that guy. I already made a video about him against all the commandments that you may remember. If not, it'll be linked in the card. Now, you may be wondering, considering the video is as long as it's been, why am I bothering to mention a Meliodas who's not the main focus of this video? Going as far as to scale him above all the commandments and prove why not a single one of them scales to him. Well, don't worry, everything has a purpose. So much so that I'd like to borrow some more of your time to talk about the creator of the 10 Commandments for a moment. El Demonio, the Demon King. If pre-end of series 7 Deadly Sins characters had a power tier list, and by pre-EOS I mean pre-Demon King Zeldris fight, where the scaling really goes mad and we get introduced to the Chaos family, Prime Leader of the 10 Commandments Meliodas and Prime Bloody Ellie Elizabeth are the high tiers. Everyone else in the entire series falls below those 2 in combination with their statements and feats. Meliodas scared away the strongest archangel in something that was not his strongest state. Meliodas, in a weaker state than his prime self, annihilated the strongest version of Zeldris that we have arguably ever seen in the entire series with his bare hands and darkness. And the only person we know to have properly brawled with and survived a prime Meliodas was a prime Elizabeth. There is no other character, not pre-DKZ fight, that even remotely holds a candle to those two individuals in terms of raw power. Well, that's a lie. There are two. The Supreme Deity and the Demon King are the two god tiers of the verse pre-DKZ. There is no one, and I mean no one, who could even remotely scuff their clothing. And if you've forgotten, the two high tiers tried and failed miserably. They literally couldn't even scuff the armor of the Demon King or the clothes of their gods. Their power was just that overwhelming. You can argue that Meliodas would have done better with his commandment, but years later, a purely critical Meliodas believes that he couldn't rival, not even surpass, his father with all the 6 commandments that he had at his disposal and the Demon King's power immediately he had access to, on top of training for 3 days. He simply said it was impossible. He could not rival the Demon King even with all those resources directly at hand. This means that one commandment would not have been a difference for Prime Meliodas, even if he got it against his fight with the Demon King and the Supreme Deity alongside Elizabeth. And notably, he believes that he can't surpass the Demon King that this analytical Meliodas, the one without his emotions, specifically remembers. The Demon King that Meliodas' body remembers. Now, you may be wondering why I'm specifically going out of my way to mention that's the Demon King that Meliodas' body specifically remembers, and that's literally only because there's this unquantifiable increase mentioned by Wild about the Demon King's time in purgatory. I only bring this up because I know someone would if I don't bring it up when I bring up my next point. Now, remember, the Demon King that Meliodas and Elizabeth died to is before any unquantifiable purgatory amps. It is the one that post-resurrection Assault Mode Meliodas is referring to when he says he must absorb all 10 commandments to be on par with. Now, why does this matter? Well, the Demon King that defeated Meliodas was at half power. You could hypothetically argue around 55% if you want to argue Estarossa was not made yet, but based on the timeline, it seems like he was, as Gother was about to cast the spell the same day Elizabeth saved the commandments, which is what got Meliodas and Elizabeth punished in the first place, and they're in different clothes when they're punished, which means at least a day has passed, at least that's what that implies, but who knows? It doesn't really matter that much. We'll save the semantics for another video. Let's talk about why this is so important and get to another controversial topic. I've said it once and I'll say it again. The commandments are amps. They buff you. They are power that happens to come with curses. They are not just curses. I get it. It's hard to believe Nakaba retconned them like that, but it'd be like that when it'd be like that sometimes. And really, this only causes problems cross-verse because of the many, many implications of such a thing. But simply put, they are power-ups. Meliodas confirms it, Estarossa and Mael show it, the Archangels confirm it both directly and indirectly, Zeldris confirms it, everyone and their mother knows they are power-ups. Now, with that being said, all 10 commandments total is equal to half the Demon King's power. This is the half of the power that was initially passed to the original demon, but then divided again into 10 pieces, forming the commandments. That means that the Demon King Meliodas and Elizabeth died to was only 10 commandments, hypothetically 11 strong. And we know, while the commandments are power-ups, base strength can factor in a lot. All the commandments wield commandments, yet there are drastic differences in their bases, which leads to Meliodas and Fraudron-sized gaps. If you don't like that, it also leads to Meliodas and Gawain-sized gaps. Now, you may be wondering, why does all this matter? What's the point of bringing this up? Well, shock horror, as deep as we are into the video, you may not remember who the 10 commandments are fighting in this context. But don't worry, I'm here to remind you. They are fighting base post-purgatory Meliodas. And remember the main person base post-purgatory Meliodas fought? Let's talk about Demon King Zeldris. Now, notably, if you were to ask me, we essentially hopped into an entirely different world scaling-wise once we reached the father-son fusion of Zeldris and the Demon King, which makes scaling particular characters way crazier and makes a lot of characters way stronger. One of these characters that benefits a lot from the advent of DKZ scaling-wise is base post-purgatory Meliodas. So, in case you don't remember, Base Meliodas pulled up on DKZ's first form, the form where he was essentially just Zeldris stacked with the 10 Commandments, aka Zeldris plus half the Demon King's power. Note, this level of power was initially described as godly, a power that was unimaginable for Prime Meliodas to even consider combating. This was a power that was beyond the scope of anything seen in the verse up to that point. And you want to know what Base Meliodas does? He proceeds to absolutely bully this power that the previous strongest version of himself couldn't even dream of dealing with. This was with his bare hands, and then he used Lost Vein. The Demon King, until he transforms into a power beyond the 10 Commandments plus Zeldris, does no damage to Base Meliodas at all, rather barely being blocked and catching some hits, and being battered. Essentially, if I had to outline a scale, it would go something like this. At the top of the list would be base post-purgatory Meliodas, followed by first form Demon King Zeldris, then the Demon King of 3,000 years past, then overwhelming gap in power, then Prime Meliodas and Prime Elizabeth, then Mael and Zeldris, then a massive gap. Now, even when you assume the 10 Commandments actually weren't fodder and say they were 10 Zeldrises, do you think 10 Zeldrises are defeating the Demon King of 3,000 years past? And yeah, I'm specifically not talking about Prime Demon King, second form Demon King. I'm not talking about Demon King Mel. No, Demon King of 3,000 years past. That Demon King. If you ask me, I don't think so. I don't think Zelda scales to Prime Meliodas, who didn't stand a chance against the Demon King. And let's be real, the 10 Commandments aren't 10 Zeldrises. They're fodder. I'd argue you can't even put the other commandments in the same tier as Zeldris. That's how much farther I think the gap is between him and the rest. This is what happens when commandments run into a non-the-one Escanor. This is what happens when Zeldris runs into a non-the-one Escanor. They are not the same. But, I've just talked about power. Maybe the speed of the commandments may match up. Let's see. All the commandments get blitzed horribly. Here's Zeldris at his strongest, the fastest of the commandments by a country mile. There is no argument I can see for any of them being faster unless you want to slop off his roll against Prime Ludishel. Even then, a weaker Zeldris blitzes a stronger draw. With that, even all that, a post-resurrection, Assault Mode Meliodas easily dominates the fastest blade in the Demon Realm in a contest of speed, while not trying. And every other commandment is slower than Zeldris, even if you want to slop them off. A Gawain base gets blitzed by a casual Escanor, but you can say it's off guard, but then he easily gets blitzed by Ludishel, someone whose Zelda should at least be bare minimum relative to, if not faster than him with Mael scaling. Derriere and Monspeed and base are also casually getting blitzed by a casual Ludishel. In their Endura states, you can argue they surpass Zeldris in raw stats like speed, but based on Elizabeth's own feat, individually, I don't see them surpassing Prime Elizabeth and Prime Meliodas. But even if they do, there's still an overwhelming tier of speed and strength that they have no hope of surpassing before they reach base post-purgatory Meliodas in terms of raw stats. Fraudulent is a fraud. It's in the name. He's getting blitzed by post-resurrection DML. Grey Road is speaking out at post-druid DML. Droll in Galaxinia for the sake of wank Prime Ludishel level. Still hypothetically slower than Zeldris, definitely slower than the two top tiers in Prime Elizabeth and Prime Meliodas, who once again have a massive, overwhelming gap between them and who they're fighting. Of course, with a few people in between. Stack that on with Melaska getting blitzed by full wings Elaine and being bullied by everyone else, even with her wank scaling to transform AM post-resurrection Mel or DKP Zeldris, she's still a bit too slow to do anything of real value. Esterosa with one commandment is also not faster than Zeldris, more so finding himself getting outsped and toyed with by human vessel archangels when they use their graces, mid to high tier commandments like Mon Speed, and he is slower than post-resurrection Assault Mode Meliodas, who literally reacts to him easily while Meliodas is fighting a whole other person in the fastest commandment, Zeldris. Speed-wise, the commandments aren't catching Prime Meliodas, now the talk of post-purgatory base Meliodas, and for a group like the commandments, this is a massive issue that heavily affects the commandments in particular. Now, let's talk about the commandments' only hope, abilities. For simplicity's sake, since we're talking about the biggest pack of demons to ever demon, we're covering all universal demonic abilities at once. Mainly because I'm not even done writing this script, recording me is already on his third bottle of water, and editing me is certainly considering the nice, beautiful factors of a window. However, with that being said, demons are demons, and it means they have darkness. Darkness is perfect. Darkness does everything. It makes weapons. It heals you. It makes wings. It makes shields. It makes clothes. It can cover your entire body and or cloak your octopus tentacles. It does everything. It truly is the heart's true essence. Sorry, wrong series. But it makes ball. On top of that, we do get to see that without a shadow of a doubt, darkness is a super malleable substance that demons use for pretty much everything. Seriously, even their insane regeneration relies on that inky shadow. Maybe darkness is the heart of all world, but I'm sorry. Another universal demonic ability is soul perception, extraction, and consumption, by range or by touch. Also, due to their toxic and caustic environment, presumably, demons possess a natural immunity to poison. Because, why not? And on top of that, the demons can sense magic from very, 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 very far away, even across extreme distances like an entire country. Now, with the general toolkit covered, let's get into specifics. Frodron's hacks are, kind of booty, unfortunately. Full size just lets them get bigger. Seemingly, there's no amp with this power up either. It's just a size change, so like a Namekian's giant form rather than a grade 8. That's literally the only unique thing he has. Gallon's magic is at least an amp, where he uses critical over to give himself around a 1.5 times multiplier. But that's it for his unique hacks. Everything else is just a fancy way of him swinging around his halberd. Derriere also isn't the most hacks. While Carlo Star adds around 200,000 pounds of force for each consecutive hit landed, that's it. She has nothing else. Same with, actually, the rest. No, I'm kidding. Grey Road is pretty hacked with breakable bugs, which works in great context with her commandment. She also has access to 5 loss, which wipes out all the senses from an individual, seemingly even the 6th sense for magical perception, considering Hauser. Due to her being a mutated Grey Demon, one could make an argument that they have access to all the Grey Demon abilities, but at the same time you could argue not. However, for the benefit of the doubt, I'll give them the Grey Road. These include Dark Nebula, Expanding Orb of Darkness, Dark Snow, a Darkness Snow that instant kills, and laser beams that they fire from their mouths, along with Purgatory Flame. Monspeed is slightly more hacks, having access to Hellblaze, the immortal slaying variant of the Purgatory Flame, and is actually the strongest user of it in all the Underworld, being able to shape it into different structures and forms. Then he has his innate magic, Trickstar, which allows him to swap the places of 2 objects in his hands as long as they're about the same size. This goes for demons, goddesses, all the way down to apples. Droll just has a bunch of rocks. I wish I was kidding, but he can turn a diamond with metal that is heavy. And also raise up earth in hands, make mini earth clones, and throw big rocks, and make them fall down. Lots of rocks. Mollusca is pretty decently hacked, having soul manipulation to a higher level than most demons, using undead puppets, having a gloom cocoon, and a giant snake form with pretty solid poison, but overall, that's about it. Gloxinia has Disaster, Tentacles, Drop of Life, a Paralysis Guardian, a Massive Beam, a big ol' spear named Basquias. He also has poison, but Mel's a demon, so really he doesn't. Zeldris is immune to magic and has Ominous Nebula. Stack that with Hellblaze, that can put people in comas, and he's good. Now, let's talk about the most important thing here, or at least arguably the most important thing about this fight. What can Meliodas do about the commandments? Lowercase c. Now that he doesn't have one, what's your favorite demon man meant to do? Well, for one, considering he fought just fine in the presence of the commandments before, I think he'll be fine to fight again, so there's no instant paralysis from love hacks. Unfortunately, they just don't work on Meliodas. Probably due to something about the control of his emotions or something like that. He's just that different. However, for number 2, Meliodas is one of the 4 people in the entire verse with the ability to remove commandments post a KO. So characters like Estarossa, Zeldris, and Grey Road are pretty much a null and void commandment-wise as long as he plays it smart, and considering he knows them all, I doubt there'd be any issue. A lot of people forget about this fact, considering Meliodas doesn't do it much, but he does know how to extract commandments. He flat out took Grey Road's commandment when no one was looking, including Merlin, someone who is very observant, and also sent Estarossa and Zell to do the exact same thing. So the commandments are a non-issue for pretty much any version of Meliodas that's strong enough to incapacitate them, as that's the only requirement to take a commandment out of somebody. So, commandments are, once again, a non-issue. However, with that being said, let's talk about Meliodas' kit, since we already started. He has Hellblaze, full counter, revenge counter, counter vanish, and it all works in base. Top that off with clones from Lost Vein and the ability to seal people, and bada bing, bada boom, the kit's done. So, now we've done that, you know what time it is, baby. Battle time. Yeah, Meliodas absolutely annihilates them. Like, all of them. Probably with his eyes closed. Because Meliodas blitzes Zeldris, knocks him out, blitzes Estarossa, knocks him out, blitzes Droll, knocks him out, and Bammo, on top of that, blitzes Grey Road, knocks her out, mumbles a few words, draws out the commandments, throws them to Merlin, and proceeds to absolutely slaughter the rest of them before Monspeed and Derriere can even rip out their 6 hearts. No abilities needed. Seriously. The gap in speed and power is so wide, and unfortunately, no one has any physical attack negation, so Meliodas would not even need to use an ounce of magic. Once again, remember, none of these characters scale to Assault Mode Prime Meliodas. Arguably not even Demon Mark. Not to talk of 50% of the Demon King, who is an overwhelming gap in power over the Prime top tiers, who is then weaker than First Form Demon King's Elders, who is then weaker than base Post-Purgatory Mel. And unfortunately, unlike back in the Prime Meliodas video, I don't even see any in-character arguments here. Meliodas post-Druid has no real remorse for the commandments, even his own brother, to the point where he was ready to annihilate them all. And a post-Purg Mel would have no reason to feel any different, except maybe some brother guilt which he can save Zeldris from. So, really, there's nothing that they can do. On top of that, there's no lack of information here either. Meliodas knows everyone here, knows all their abilities, so he's not going to get caught lacking by any surprises, considering there will be no surprises at hand. Even when being gracious and randomly pulling out the Endura that used to be commandments like Chimera Endura and Boruja, considering they should not scale above the 50% Demon King, considering he ruled over them still in his own realm, I think Meliodas would still slap. And that's how crazy the 1 feat is. I know people are going to be like, but there's the commandments, they aren't, just read the manga. Like, just read the manga. Like, I wish I could say something else, but read the manga. In terms of the commandments being amps, like, literally, Meliodas' whole goal was to get all 10 commandments so he could amp himself. To the point where he could rival his father to get rid of the curses. We all read the Mael/Esterosa arc, right, where he absorbed commandments and got power amps. Like, we all read that. I know we all read that. I know we're all literate. And we also saw when a base post-Purgatory Meliodas pulled up on Demon King Zeldris without the intent to kill because he did not want to get rid of Zeldris and was still absolutely manhandling, bro. Like, straight slapping him around like he owed him lunch money. Like it was abuse. Like, straight up, it was kind of going crazy. And by kind of, I mean just actually. So we're all here. We're all witnesses to this. This is not any crazy outlandish stuff I'm speaking. And you may be like, but maybe it's it's not an outlier. Like, at all. Because the power progression is just simple. Zeldris levels up once when he's the Demon King, and Meliodas has to level up to match him. Then he proceeds to stop leveling up because he doesn't want to harm Zeldris anymore. He's so focused on trying to save him. So that's why he doesn't ever go assault mode against the Prime Demon King until he literally is forced to when Escador decides to throw his life away. And then True Magic is just generally above. So 50% Demon King plus Zeldris gets washed by base post-Purgatory Mel. Ironically, if he gets washed before Mel even really whoops out Lost Vein too. Like, Lost Vein, the crazy Sacred Treasure ramp, just not even a factor at first. Mel's just washing. And, like, seriously, none of the commandments have any hacks that would actually work. Other than their commandments, which Mel is not stupid enough to fall for. He would legit just be like, oh, so you guys, y'all are commandments. The commandments. Well, Blitz, absolutely annihilate, remove all the commandments, and then probably flicker into True Magic, erase those, and go back and just slaughter the rest. I don't know. Like, I wish there was a more deep, complicated, and, like, brain-teasing, thought-provoking battle. Like, I wish I could give you guys more, but it's not complicated. Like, for it to be complicated, you have to just blatantly not read the chapters. Like, just don't read the manga, and then maybe. And I know it seems crazy, right? But it's 10 people, and they're so hexed. And to be fair, I don't think, I mean, you could, if it's by knockout, you could argue, yeah. But if you're going by, like, to the death standards, I don't think Full Wings King beats the commandments. I don't think post-Infinity DK fight Merlin beats the commandments. I don't think post-Purgatory post-Elaine Bond beats the commandments, because they all die to Grey Road. But considering Meliodas is once again one of 4 people in the entire verse who knows exactly how to remove commandments, I just don't think they mean anything. And that's the only real significant hacks that they have that would actually do something. Meliodas is not getting hurt by Monspeed Tailblaze. I'm sorry. Meliodas is not going to sit there and let Derriere combo up to 1 million to actually scuff him. It's not happening. none of Droll's rocks are going to do anything. Meliodas is immune to poison, and that big old Basquiat's beam is getting full countered right back in Galaxania's face. If he even is able to land it, that's the thing. That's the crazy thing about the DKZ fight. The overwhelming gap in power that was established between the two previous strongest characters in the verse and the two god tiers in Prime Mel and Prime Elizabeth versus the Supreme Deity and the Demon King when they were at 50% power is too much. Too much for no one to even scale to the Prime Mel and Prime Elizabeth and then have to clear that and then have to clear DK's first form. Like that, the gap in power is nutty. And normally power wouldn't matter if Meliodas didn't have the one key to victory. But since he does, GG. Ironically enough, now I think about it, yeah, post-Infinity Merlin, DKZ fight does solo the commandments. Because she's not affected by Grey Road's commandment, because she has infinite time. That's it. So she solos too. Maybe that's another video for another time. But that's the thing. The gap in power and speed in combination with the one hacks that Meliodas needs clears it. And even if you want to say Meliodas somehow can't remove the commandments, even though it's clearly shown on panel that he can remove, manipulate, and use them to however he feels like it, he can just seal them all. If it's really that deep. Like if he can seal Gelda for literal 16 years at a time when he was at a fraction of the power he is, something tells me he could seal some commandments who at this point would be fodder to him in terms of raw stats. He can pull out 10 sealing jutsus. It ain't that crazy. It's not that deep. And this is one of like the few battles where I can't really see a counter argument for this. Like notably, throw pretty much any other battle I've done at you previously. Every other battle I've done at you previously. Throw any battle I've done previously, and I can probably argue something different. Like, let me think of some of my most. Like I can think equal stats of ways for Goku to beat Meliodas. I can think of some ways that commandments could hypothetically lose to the Akatsuki. I could think of some ways that hypothetically, I can't think of ways that King would beat Escanor in the one ultimate. But still, like this is a battle where I would actually be interested to see what argument. Like you would have to somehow say or prove that Zeldris plus the 10 commandments somehow is not stronger or at least equal to the Demon King of 3,000 years past. That's the only thing you have to do. But how do you do that? You literally can't, because the commandments are just raw power, which is the Demon King's power, and you absorb all 10 of them, you become the new vessel for the Demon King, plus your original stats. That's it. That's all the commandments are. And Meliodas bullies that. Like on panel. I got nothing. I got nothing. So I don't know. I know it's the reason I even do battles like this, because I know it's an outlandish claim, but this is like one of the many examples of how crazy the power creep is in Seven Deadly Sins, especially by the end of the series. Like, characters go crazy for no reason. And this is one of the many times they went crazy for no reason. Nakaba's just like, yeah, forget it. I'll just make base Mel this strong. Because I don't think Nakaba thinks about it that much. It doesn't really matter to him. He just writes a plot that he wants to write with characters he wants to write with. So he's vibing. He has absolutely no problem with what happened. Meanwhile, at first this used to cause me a headache because I'm like, wait, the implications of this are insane. How strong is he now? But does this mean base Meliodas, base post-purgatory Meliodas could hypothetically solo the back half of the verse? Yeah. It'd be like that, wouldn't it be like that sometimes? However, yeah, the battle, it's I got nothing. Like, what's Fraudron gonna do? Can you tell me anything? What's Prime even Prime Gallon? What's Prime Gallon and Critical Over gonna do? What's Melascula gonna do? Some skeletons? Try to rip out his soul? Oh, that won't work. She was struggling to rip out his soul when he was bloody, bleeding, and in base on the ground when he was post-druid. Oh, there was also something I saw. I posted that preview video, and someone thought that Meliodas post-resurrection and Meliodas post-purgatory are the same. They are not. Just not at all. I know there are no numbers to suggest it, but fun fact, there's no numbers for post-purgatory bond either. So unless you want to tell me that post-purgatory bond is equal to pre-purgatory bond, doesn't necessarily make sense. But with that being the case, there's the misconception because there's no, like, once again, there's no numbers, but it's quite obvious by the variation in feats, a base pre-purgatory Meliodas, even post-resurrection, was unable to break out of Melascula's gloom cocoon. Then, a base Meliodas post-purgatory punched Demon King Zeldris' first form in the mouth. So I feel like there's just a drastic level of power difference here that is quite noticeable, quite obvious, if you will. And with that being the case, I don't blame anyone for questioning this. I know every single person is going to be like, but teamwork, but the power of teamwork, if they fuse all their attacks together, somehow they'll be able to win. No, they won't. They really won't. Unfortunately, I don't think so. One, because I don't think they can. I literally just don't think they can do that. And two, they all get blitzed. Like this is the furthest thing from rocket science. I feel like I'm repeating myself at this point. If you guys do have something that just straight kills it all, just absolutely knocks base post-purgatory Meliodas down to fodder level, weaker than beginning of series Meliodas, let me know. Let me know in the comment section. I'm very, very intrigued by this one, mainly because there was a decent amount of people in that poll that I made, I believe around 12%, that did say that, oh no, the Commandment's got this, and I want to know how. I really want to know how. Maybe some of you guys forgot about the whole Meliodas being able to steal commandments thing. Maybe you forgot about Meliodas being able to steal things. Maybe you just forgot that base post-purgatory Meliodas is insanely strong. These things happen. But please tell me what you guys think down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure the notification most so you miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a Patreon down below. You can support me for as low as $1 a month. It gets into exclusive videos, early content, and more. Thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is That Guy with the Pencil, writing off.